Hi. Alright guys, welcome back to my channel. If you're brand new here, my name is Nikki and this is my book nook. And honestly, this is a very good time to be joining the book nook if you are new here, because we are in a new era. I officially, in 2024, am in my Boys of Tommen era. It has happened. I have broken the seal and there is simply no going back, guys. I have sort of put off starting this series because this is just one of those that I knew I was gonna love it. I knew it was gonna consume my brain, and I'm like, I only have so much time. Like, I've had a stressful few months. I've had a lot going on and I've been dying to read this book, but I'm just like, I know once I get into it, it's going to be a deep, dark hole. It's gonna be an obsession. It's gonna be all I'm thinking about. Like, I'm gonna be ravenous for it. Like, I only have so much brain capacity, but the holidays came, everything kind of chilled out, and I was like, you know what? I think I'm ready. I'm gonna give it a try. And I finished 2023 with reading Binding 13, and it was my favorite read of the entire year. It was the very last book I read in 2023, and right away I was like, yeah, #1 spot. I am just as obsessed with it as I thought I was gonna be. Honestly, maybe even more. I didn't totally know what to expect from it, but it was just everything and more. So because of how this series is sort of structured, I really went into it pretty blind. Like, I knew it was about rugby players. I knew it was set in Ireland. Otherwise, I knew nothing else. And I have a very good friend, Ashley. She's actually on YouTube and Bookstagram as Archives of Ashley. She adores this series. Like, this is her #1 in her heart. She constantly talks about it. And she actually sent me Binding 13 as a Christmas present last year in 2022, and it took me a full freaking year to read it, but I'm so glad because I finally have read it and I have her to talk to about it. Like, when you find a new book or a new series and you're just like obsessed with it, it's like the hardest thing in the world when you don't have someone to talk to about it. That's why I ended up making this YouTube channel, literally, because I was reading so many books that I just didn't have anyone to talk to about. So I talked to you guys, but yeah, talking to Ashley, she kind of explained it a little more. Basically, this whole series follows these rugby players in Ireland. Like I said, they go to this college called Tommen College, and each sort of book, there's kind of sets of stories. There's all these duets within the series. So you have this first sort of duet that is the 13 duet, I guess you would call it. All the numbers have to do with the boys' numbers, their rugby numbers, number 13, number 6, number 7, whatever. So this sort of first set of books is Johnny's story, and I guess Johnny and Shannon's story. And it's just so interesting the way it's set up, because you guys know Magnolia Parks is my favorite series of all time. The Magnolia Parks universe just blew my mind the first time I read it, because it's one of those series that, I mean, the first time I read it, I had never read anything before that was structured in that way, where it's the same story is kind of going on, but you kind of jump around within the books and you see it from one person's perspective, and then you see the same story happen, but it's from someone else's perspective. So there's other scenes thrown in there, but then you see the same scenes happen multiple times from multiple people's points of view, and as it builds and grows, it is just such a deep story full of so many layers, and I was just so mind blown by that. So I was really excited to hear that this series has that same sort of vibe. I think the entire sort of series is the same timeline, if I'm correct. This book is this is the complete story for Johnny and Shannon, and then from here you go to the duet of the sevens. The 7 duets, I don't know, it's saving, oh wait, no, 6. Sorry, God, I have not got it straight yet in my head. So after 13, you have 6. So it's saving 6 and redeeming 6, I believe. And then you go to 7, which is taming 7. I'm still learning, guys, but yeah, so from what I've heard, when you move to the next sort of duet, it actually starts earlier in the timeline, but ends up kind of finishing where this book finishes, and you do see those same scenes, but from a totally different perspective with all these different parts added in. I just love that. I don't know, it's, after reading so many books for so many years, I feel I've seen a lot of different types of stories, styles of writing. It's kind of fun to experience a series that's very complex and has this different sort of style to it. And I love putting puzzle pieces together and seeing things continue to build and, falling in love with characters because you feel like you know every single one of them. Like I love meeting characters in one book and then you kind of get their story as it continues and you see these other characters come back, and like by the time it finishes it's just like one big found family, beautiful kind of storyline. Like I'm just so here for that. I just love books and series like that, and I'm very, very excited that I have joined this world and excited to see where it goes. But essentially what this video is I'm kind of just gonna make it like a two-part book review. I want to talk about Binding 13 because obviously I have finished it and I'm about to jump right into Keeping 13. Like I have been waiting. I had a couple of things when I got home from the holidays that I had to take care of, and I was like, the very minute that I am like done, stress-free, like have time to read, I'm jumping straight into this book and I seriously can't wait. But I want to talk about Binding 13 before I jump into this because like I obviously have no idea what's going to happen in this one yet, like where it's going to go, like how Johnny and Shannon's story is going to kind of end. So yeah, I just wanted to talk to you guys about this first. So if you have not read this series yet, if you're unfamiliar, if you haven't read Binding 13, I'm going to do kind of like a spoiler-free little portion right now where I just kind of talk about the series and my thoughts on the series, and then after a certain point I'm gonna be like, okay, from here on out, spoilers, because obviously like once I read Keeping 13, I don't feel like I can talk about the second book in like a duet series, whatever, without spoilers, and I don't want to do it. Like I just want to, you know, give all of my raw, real thoughts to you guys. So pretty much Binding 13, this story, like I said, it's Johnny and Shannon's story, and Shannon is kind of the main, I mean, they're both main characters. It's a dual point of view story, but Shannon basically is this girl that has grown up in a very rough family situation. I've read a lot of books with female characters specifically, I mean male and female, but a lot of female characters that have had like rough home lives, that have dealt with like, you know, not having much growing up, having, you know, abusive parents, just a bad situation. But Shannon might just be like the worst I've ever read. Like her life is very rough. She has not the best parents. Her father struggles with addiction. He's a raging alcoholic and pretty much hasn't been able to work her entire life because he's just like shackled by this sort of addiction. And so her mother really has to take on the role of like the caretaker for the family, and she has to work all the time. And so she's always kind of been home with just her father, and they have several kids. I think there's like 5 or 6 of them in the family. They just keep having kids that they can't support, and they're constantly struggling for money. Like it's just a big struggle, and her father has a lot of resentment towards Shannon. She's the only girl in this family of all boys, and he just didn't want a girl, didn't want her, just wants his sons to be like sports stars. And so he really takes a lot of his anger out on Shannon verbally and physically. Like he's very abusive. If you are triggered by any sort of you know, violence, this is not the book for you, because you see very graphic depictions of not like sexual violence, but just pure violence. Like he just abuses her, beats her. She just knows that like he can be set off at any moment, and she isn't really allowed to have much of a life, has never been able to like really have friends and go out or do anything, and she's just has to take care of her family. Like she's kind of become like a caretaker from a very young age. Her and her brother Joey are the 2 oldest, and her brother Joey is actually that's a lie. There's one older brother that we know of, but he's like not a part of the family anymore. Like he kind of took the brunt of all of this for so long, and then ended up like he had to leave. He couldn't be there anymore. So now you have Joey and you have Shannon, and Joey is the protector. Like he protects Shannon. He's the only one that can protect Shannon. He's kind of the adult now and fights with the father constantly. And so Joey actually is like the next set of books. The Saving 6 and Redeeming 6 is from Joey's point of view. Not to get ahead of myself, but like I'm very, very excited to see his story, because I just have a feeling like I already loved him from what I've seen in this book. Like we love just like a broken boy that's been through a lot and just like deserves the world, and that's just, I just know that's gonna be him. So I'm excited to see that. But anyways, Shannon has had a rough home life, but her life really hasn't been any better when she's at school either. She's been heavily bullied her entire life, just for all sorts of things. She's very small, she's very little, you know, she hasn't had access to the best clothes or anything like that. I don't even really know what it is, but people have just always like hated her. The girls in school have picked on her to the point of like beating her up and stuff, and she's, you know, been in and out of school so many times, and it's gotten to the point where like her brother Joey was having to step in, defend her. He was getting in fights. Like it came to a breaking point. So her mother, kind of out of desperation, is like, we have to pull you out of your school and we're going to send you to Tommen College, which is a very, you know, nice private school in town. And the only two friends that Shannon has ever really had growing up actually go to that school. So it's like a good situation. She'll have two girlfriends. She can, you know, go there, hopefully start over. And so that is really where this story starts out. It's her first day going to Tommen College, and whenever she goes there, she very quickly has a not so meet cute with Johnny. Johnny Kavanagh is like the rugby star of this town in Ireland that they live in. I mean, all over the country, everyone knows his name. Like, he is the big up and coming star. He's going to be playing for the national team. He's just trying to get through school. But like Johnny, you know, he's a high school or college, whatever, athlete, but it's like he's not even a student. Like, his entire focus is rugby. Like, he has like this training, you know, program that he's on, this nutrition program. He has, you know, all of these coaches and trainers that work with him. Like, his body is like a machine. Rugby is his focus. It's like his #1 dream, life goal, whatever. And so he's just trying to like get through this last year of school so he can go off and play rugby, essentially. But he's been having a tough time lately because he's had this injury that he's been dealing with for a long time, and it finally got to a point where he had to have surgery to take care of it. And like, it just was gonna get worse and worse. So he didn't want to do it. He just wanted to keep pushing it, but he had to have this surgery, and he's kind of not done a good job of allowing himself to heal. He just has this fear that if he stops training, if he takes it easy, if he sits out of any games, like, he's gonna lose his shot. So he's been playing on this injury, and that's kind of like where we first meet Johnny. That's like where he is right now. Like, he has this really, really bad injury that he keeps kind of re-injuring. He's not allowing himself to heal. And so the way him and Shannon like meet this first day is like, she has to walk across the rugby field or pitch, and he like throws a ball and it like hits her in the back of the head, and that's their like not so meet cute. Her mother freaks out because she's like gets like a concussion, and she of course thinks like, oh, she's being bullied right away. So her mother wants her to have nothing to do with Johnny. The school is like, you two need to stay away from each other. But that's kind of how this story starts out. That's where Johnny and Shannon meet, and it's not a good initial meeting, but the two kind of just continue to cross paths after that, and you end up like learning so much about Shannon and her home life and like her friends and stuff. But then you also have Johnny and like his friends, and you know, the other rugby players who you can tell, like, these characters, Shannon's friends, Johnny's friends, like, you can tell like we're going to get stories from them. Like, there's just such a build. It's such a family, you know, sort of found family sort of like environment within this story, and I just loved it. Like, there's not like a ton of a plot to this. Like, this is a very, very character driven story. It is just like the story of Johnny and Shannon's relationship and what they're kind of going through, and you know, Johnny wanting to get to play rugby, and Shannon just trying to like make it through the day and deal with her home life situation, and like these feelings that she has for Johnny that she knows she's like not allowed to have because like she's not allowed to be in a relationship. Like, there's just so much to it. But this was just such an easy book to read. Like, it was one of those where like the author's tone, Chloe Walsh, my new queen, I'm just obsessed with her. It feels so like natural. It feels like you're like reading a story about your friends. It feels like you're there. It feels like you're a part of it. Like, there is so much dialogue in this story, like pages and pages and pages of just like conversations that are happening between Johnny and Shannon, like them and their friends. And you know, it just goes on and on and on and on, but it's like, it never gets old. It never gets tiring. Like, there were a lot of chapters in here that were really long, but I didn't even realize it. I'd be sitting there and I'd be reading and reading and reading, and like, I'd get to an end of the chapter and I'd be like, oh, that's so good. And then I'd be like, shit, I've been reading this chapter for like an hour. Like, it's just such an addicting read. I couldn't put it down. I wanted to know what happened. And like, there's just so much sort of build up and tension in this story. It is like the most slow burn book I think I've maybe ever read, and I love slow burn. I know that's like a controversial thing. Some people hate it. They're like, kiss on page like 12 and I'm happy. I'm not about that. I love to see the slow build. I love to see like the will they or won't they, like the, because it makes like all the little things like so special, like every little touch, every little glance, every little embrace like all the things that happen, like all the words exchanged, the things they do for each other. So like by the time anything actually happens, you're like on the edge of your seat, freaking like kicking your feet. You're like, come on, like I just want something to happen. So literally you have to get through like this whole book before you really see, you know, anything physical happen. But it's like so freaking worth it. I'm just gonna say, like, if you are not a fan of that, you probably are gonna struggle with this book, but like it's just so good. Like I thought Mariana Zapata was the queen of slow burn, and I'm convinced now it's Chloe Walsh, like easily after one book. I just really loved it. I was really obsessed with it, and it ends on a total cliffhanger. Like I can just tell these books, it's really like one big long book that kind of had to be split up because it's so long, because it ends like in the middle of a scene. Like it's in the middle of something happening. It literally ends with like a question, and it just is gonna pick up right where it left off clearly. And it was an ending where you're just like, oh shit, like shit hit the fan, things are going down. And yeah, so I'm just very excited to move on to the next one. If you have not read this, clearly you can tell from what I'm saying, like you should read it. And at this point now, you're gonna need to leave because I'm gonna talk about spoilers, and I need to get all my thoughts out. So obviously where this book sort of left off, Johnny like got injured. He re-injured himself. He tore open his stitches. God, like the whole book, you know, you're seeing this talk of his injury, which, God, it sounds like such a brutal injury, like surgery on your groin. Like I can't even imagine, especially like as a guy, it just seems so brutal. And I did not expect that to happen. And maybe I'm dumb. I just, like, obviously you're hinted at the whole book, like, okay, like he's got this injury, like he's not letting it heal, he's pushing himself too hard. But I didn't think that he was gonna get like really badly injured again, like to the point that like his stitches are ripped open and all that. Like I didn't realize it was that bad. Like I figured he was sore, like he needed to rest. I didn't know that like his stitches literally still hadn't fully healed. So when that happened, you're just like, oh shit. And like I felt like I could relate to Johnny so much. I really loved him as a character. I mean, I feel like I loved everyone in this book, but Johnny, like, I know that feeling, and I think a lot of people do, of just like having a goal or having like a dream and something you're so like laser focused on. Anyone that has ever played a sport that they really loved, I think knows that feeling. Like I played volleyball all throughout high school. Like I played at school, I played like on a national team, we traveled and stuff, and volleyball for so long was just like everything to me. And I remember like those scary moments when you get injured and you think like, oh, I'm not gonna get to play. You think you're gonna like lose your chance. Like, God, I got like injured in high school. I broke my leg, and I was just like, I've worked so hard for this. Like, I just want to come back. Like, I can't, I'm gonna like lose my chance. Someone else is gonna take my spot. Like when you're just like in that like mode of playing a sport and it just like feels like it's everything to you, like I can understand, you know, to some extent. Obviously I was not a professional or anything like that, but just being a professional or being on the way to being a professional, I can just imagine it's like, it would be so scary to think that like all of that was gonna be ripped away, no matter what your dream is. Like if it's right there and you're so close, like, so I understood Johnny, but it's like you just want to shake him. You're like, come on, you're like, he's obviously hurting himself, he's making things worse for himself, and then he ultimately gets injured at the end, and he, you know, he's gonna be out for a while. He has to be out for a while, and now it's like, if you rest, you can maybe get back. It's will still be okay, but it's like that idea of being so obsessed with something, a dream. My cat is like snoring behind me. Can y'all hear him? He's like full-blown snoring. He's so loud. Just like having a goal where it just consumes you and it feels like it's your whole world, and like you kind of get to the point where you're like, I don't know who I am if I don't have this. Like I think a lot of people can kind of relate to that in one sense or another, and I really felt for Johnny like all throughout this book, and I just loved him. I loved how much he cared for Shannon. I love how he was like a protector of her. And oh my God, speaking of protector of her, Joey freaking Lynch, I just I'm so interested to see more about him. I'm so interested to get into his books and just see what continues to happen. Like him and her just have this like amazing relationship, and he's just such a good big brother. But I just can't even imagine like being in that role of like, you almost have to become an adult when you're still like a kid, and you have to care for all these other kids, and like having your parents be the people you're supposed to like look up to, and they're supposed to be your protector, but now you're protecting your other siblings from your parents. Like it's just so rough. Like their situation, it's so brutal, it's so hard to read. Like you're just like on, I was on pins and needles like every time. Is that what that term means, on pins and needles? Like I'm stressed. I was stressed every single time Shannon was at home. Like, God, especially like the scene whenever Johnny like was at home with her, like went to her house, like was there and studying. I'm like, why are you letting this man in your house? Like, I was so stressed out. It's just so rough. So I'm really interested to see what comes out of it, especially like with the cliffhanger where the dad once again like beats the crap out of Shannon, like the worst he ever has this time, because she got caught making out with Johnny in the locker room and her dad constantly thinks she's a whore and all this stuff. It's so terrible. It's so like, it's so hard to read. It's so hard to read. And so I want to know what happens. Like, I just think either the dad has to go or Shannon's gonna have to go. Like, this isn't, they're not gonna be able to continue to do this. Like, they're not gonna be able to stay in this house and her go to Tommen, and like where does this leave her and Johnny? Like, I just feel like there's so much to it, and I'm just like, this is the floppiest book. Like, I can't even hold it. It just like flops right over, but I love it. But yeah, I'm interested to see where it goes. And this is a complete random total sidebar. I love Gibbsy so much. Like, he's such, like, all the side characters in this book are so good. Like, they all have like their own personalities, and Gibbsy is like such a good friend. I love when there's like a really solid like friend figure that's like funny and like kind of relieves, you know, has some comic relief here and there, but isn't annoying. Like, it's the perfect balance. Like, Gibbsy is the perfect like kind of not quirky, that's not really the right word, but he's just like funny, you know, he's like there for a laugh, but he's like such a good friend in the way that he, you know, also cares for Shannon and looks out for her because he's looking out for Johnny. And I think there's like a lot more to his character, the way he like was hooking up with that secretary and to get Shannon's records for Johnny. Like, right when that happened, I was like, oh, okay, I'm intrigued by you. Like, something about you. He almost gives me like Will Grayson energy from the Devil's Night series, and you guys know like Will Grayson is like one of my top book boyfriends of all time. So I don't know, I'm just interested to see what happens with Gibbsy. I'm interested to see what happens with everybody. Like, I just know this world's about to like consume my life. So I'm very, very excited to jump into Keeping 13 to see what happens. I just yeah, so I don't want to do like a full-blown reading vlog because I just want to be able to like chill, read this, enjoy it, not have to think about like checking in. But don't you guys worry, as soon as I finish it, I will come on here, I will give you every single thought that I have, all spoilers included. Probably ramble on for like 20 minutes because I just don't see how that's not gonna happen. But yeah, I'm going to start it right now, and the next time you see me, I will have finished it, and I'm just interested to see what happens. So I'm gonna dive in. Hi guys, I feel like this is like a me before reading Keeping 13 versus me after. I finished this book yesterday, and I kind of like took the evening and this entire day to process it. It is now late in the evening, so it's been about 24 hours, and oh my God, this is one of those books, one of those series where like you kind of finish it or finish a part of it and your heart just like hurts. You just feel like these are your friends, and in a way, like when you're closing one chapter of it, because you know, these two books are about Johnny and Shannon. Like, I know that there are more books to come. We're gonna see more parts of it. We're gonna see more of them. But I think for the most part, like, this is their story and it's kind of like at its conclusion, at least from their point of view. And it just feels like you're saying goodbye to them or something. It's just a weird feeling. It's like a deep ache. Also, that kind of realization you have where you're like, oh, none of this is real. I don't want to talk about that. But I kind of had that last night, and God, this book, I'll be so honest, it was kind of a rough read. It took me a while. I would say I spent about a week and a half reading this book. I mean, it is long. Let me just tell you that. These books are very long. It's like 650 pages, and the font is so tiny. Like, I felt like I was reading this book forever. I felt like I would be sitting there for hours, and it's like, okay, I read like 30 or 50 pages, but I didn't mind it. Like, I really like took my time with it, getting through it, because this is a heavy book. Like, I'm just gonna say right out of the gate, I enjoyed Binding 13 a lot more than I enjoyed Keeping 13. I think this book is kind of fun because it's like you're getting introduced to Johnny and Shannon, and you know, you're seeing their sort of first like initial parts of their love story play out. And there are dark things within this book, obviously. Like, this entire, you know, story is very kind of dark and heavy with Shannon's whole family situation. But at least in this book, like, it's not, I don't know, it's not as much in the forefront. I kind of felt reading this book how I felt reading It Starts With Us by Colleen Hoover. If you know that experience, you kind of know that first book, you're finding out about these troubles that she's going through with this guy, and the second book, it's kind of like just like with this series, the second book you're like, okay, like the couple's together now, like now you want them to get their happily ever after, we're seeing their love story play out, like you're supposed to be excited about it. But the entire book with It Starts With Us, like I was just like white knuckling it with suspense, because you just like know this other character is like gonna come back, like the shit is gonna hit the fan, like something is gonna happen and this is all just gonna like blow up. So it's like hard for me kind of to enjoy those happy moments, because that's just constantly like looming in the back of my mind, and that's exactly how I felt reading this book. And it was hard because like what was happening in it was like so sweet and so cute. Like you finish Binding 13 with like Johnny and Shannon finally, after so long, just like admitting to themselves and each other that like they're into each other, they like each other, they more than like each other, they freaking like love each other, and they finally kiss. You get like your first real kiss out of them, and then the story ends on like such a cliffhanger with Shannon coming home and her father hearing about what happened with her and Johnny in the locker room, and him effectively like beating the shit out of her nearly within an inch of her life. And that's kind of the cliffhanger you leave it on, of like that happening, and you're like, is she okay? Also like, is Johnny okay? What's gonna happen with this family situation? Like you just don't know. And then the book opens up, and God, like the beginning of this book was so hard to read. It was so graphic. You're continuing to see this scene of Shannon like just being horribly like beaten, and her brother Joey like trying to defend her, and him sort of giving their mother this ultimatum of like, pick him or pick us, like your children or, you know, your husband who's freaking horrible to all of us. And yeah, Shannon like ends up in the hospital, and kind of at the same time this is happening, you have Johnny kind of putting the pieces together and finally realizing like what's been going on with her, and that it's her father that's been leaving these marks on her and stuff. And so the whole story just kind of explodes. We have Darren, her older brother, who we hear about a little bit in Binding 13, but you know, he comes back to kind of try to help put the family back together. And he's such an interesting character, because I feel like you're supposed to kind of hate Darren right out the gate, because he comes back and he hasn't been here for so long, and Shannon kind of hates him because he feels like, you know, Darren abandoned their family, but now he's back and he's trying to help. And I have to say, like, maybe it's a hot take, but I never hated him. It's obviously frustrating because in these stories, like, you know, when you have these teenage characters and you have these older characters that are like, you're not in love, you don't know what love is. It's like, oh my God, we've all been there where you're like, don't tell me how I feel. And so that was obviously frustrating, like Darren and her mother trying to keep Shannon from Johnny. But at the same time, like, obviously I could not pretend to put myself in this situation, but Darren, like, you see it from Joey's point of view, you know, you see how Joey has been like the protector of this family for so long and has had to like fight every single day, and like I can't imagine the toll that would take on someone. So at the same time, it's like I almost have to have a soft spot for Darren of like, yes, it's freaking horrible that he left, but like what was he supposed to do at the same time? Like you almost feel like it's that moral dilemma of like, do you let one sibling be happy and get out of here and live their life, or are we all just miserable forever? Like, you know, it's so hard. And so I can kind of like, I don't know, I can kind of understand him in the way, and I don't feel like I hated him the way I was maybe supposed to. And you know, throughout the book you grow to like him more. I think he really was just trying to do what he could to help and kind of like make amends now at this point. But anyways, after Darren kind of comes, now we really start to see what's going on with Joey, because we know Joey from the first book, but you don't really get to see this dark side of him. It's kind of first revealed towards the end of Binding 13. He clearly has like an addiction. He seems like such a strong character, and he's like the protector of all of these kids, but you know, someone can only do that for so long before they break. And you know, you have to have like something to sort of drown out all this sadness and pain that I'm sure he's obviously feeling. And so we learn that Joey is addicted to drugs. It doesn't really get into the specifics of what it is, but you can tell it's like bad stuff. And yeah, so you can see he's struggling, and it's so interesting getting all these glimpses, because he has this girlfriend Aoife, and you know that like the next 2 books are Joey's books, so we're gonna see that whole story play out. And I think it's so interesting how we know now that like the 2 of them are together. We see them together in this book. You can see Aoife clearly loves Joey with her entire heart and soul, and he feels like he is such a like lost cause, and that she's so much better than him, and he's you know, kind of, he loves her so much, but also you see him multiple times throughout this book, like trying to push her away and tell her to like go live her life and stop worrying about him. And so, oh my God, it has me like on the edge of my seat to like read his book. But yeah, you have Joey's like issues going on, and he kind of keeps leaving and coming back because he can't stay away from his family. He loves his family, but also he's just like tired. He's so freaking tired, and he's just waiting for their father to show back up again because he like runs away, and the mom is insisting she won't let him back in the house, but Joey just knows this cycle of like, he'll come back and it'll all get bad again, and just like, God. So the entire book, I'm like, that's all I can think about. I'm having the hardest time with everything else going on because I'm just like, when is the dad gonna come back? The dad is obviously going to come back. So while that's happening, you have Shannon and Johnny kind of like starting to date, I guess, for the first time and really be together. And I feel like half of this book is like just a tease of like, will they or won't they? Like, you know, their physical relationship. Johnny's really trying to be slow with Shannon because she's like not, you know, she's not experienced and this is her first time, but also he doesn't want to like take advantage of her. Like, she's just been through something so horrible, and he's so like upset with himself that he didn't see it sooner. And like, there's just so much to it, but so much of this book is like them, you know, are they gonna do the deed or not? And it got to be so like, oh my God, there's so many like interruptions and things that kept them from it. And God, every time they hung out, like Shannon's mother would like lose her mind, or Darren, like it was just like a never ending cycle. Her mother being like, Johnny's just like your father. It was just so hard to read. And yeah, like that kind of builds up for a long time. You see, God, Bella, who's like maybe the worst character in the entire world. Like, I don't know that I hate a character more than I hate Bella. Like, I'm being so freaking for real. She's just constantly there. This girl that's like obsessed with Johnny that he used to hook up with, and they were never official, but she like thinks they're official. And it's so weird because she's like literally dating his teammate now, like fully they are together, yet she like cannot get over Johnny and is like obsessed with Shannon and thinks that Shannon stole him from her. It's like so pathetic. It's so gross. I'm like, I'm also so confused because when she's being so horrible to Shannon and to Johnny, I'm like, do you think he wants you back? Like, why do you think acting like, you think you're gonna like literally beat his girlfriend up in the bathroom and then he's gonna be like, oh Bella, I've missed you, like I want you back? Like, sis, what is your, like, I'm just trying to understand what the thought process is. Like, why do you think this is gonna be the way to get him back? I'm just so confused. She was horrible. So you've got that going on, and yeah, like I said, it's just this whole big build up to, is the dad gonna come back? And when it finally does happen, it was such a like explosive scene. This whole book just feels like you're watching a movie. It's so like descriptive. Like I've said before, there's like so much dialogue, and God, like whenever everything kind of blew up at once and Joey got mad and he left and Darren leaves to go after him, and then the dad freaking shows up, and I was like, no, like I knew it was gonna happen, but the way that it happened was so like dramatic, and it's like, no, not now, not whenever it's just Shannon and like none of the older boys are home and she can't protect him. And Johnny literally deserves the entire world, him and his parents, my God, because they like just care for this family. The way he goes and like gets Shannon out and gets the boys out, the house freaking gets set ablaze. It's so crazy. I didn't know where this was gonna go, but I kind of wondered. I was like, is the mom gonna end up dead? Like, I just wasn't sure. I wasn't sure what the resolution was going to be. When it started to become obvious that like Johnny's parents kind of wanted to foster the kids, I was like, okay, at least like they'll get them away. But I didn't know that this was going to end. I thought that the dad was going to die. I thought someone was going to kill the dad is kind of where I thought this was going to go. I kind of honestly hoped it was going to be Shannon. I thought that she was going to like lose her shit and just like grab a knife and like, that's a little violent, but it's kind of what I saw coming, and that didn't happen. But God, it was so horrible. And then also, while that's all going on, you have Johnny, who's still like, rugby is his entire life, and it's like, is he gonna get to go to the national team? He's like recovering from his injury, and there's just like so much happening at once. And the whole time I'm like, what is Johnny gonna do? Like, yes, I get he loves Shannon, he doesn't want to leave her, but also like, you worked for this your whole life, so you better not just like quit rugby altogether. Like, I just didn't know where it was gonna go. And I feel like altogether, like when it ended, I was very happy with the conclusion. I thought it was perfect. I totally kind of understood where Johnny was coming from of like, he wants to be around Shannon, but it's not just that. Like, he never got a chance to be a teenager because he's been so laser focused on rugby like his whole life. Like, he's always eaten like on a strict schedule and worked out every single day and worked out on the weekends and like just hasn't let himself have fun. And now he's like here, and it's like, this is gonna be my life from here on out. Like, I just know that feeling. I feel like everyone does, where you're like, okay, like things are gonna change now. It's not gonna be like this anymore. And he's just like, he wants like another year to like be a teenager. And he, as good as he is, like he can wait another year. Like he'll get signed to play rugby if he waits a year. So anyways, I just, when it ended, I was like, okay, it's perfect. I really liked it. Like I said, just enjoyment wise, I enjoy Binding 13 so much more, but at the same time, like getting into this book now, like by the time I got to the end of it, you truly like, you just get to know all these characters, the whole friend group, freaking Gibbsy and Johnny's relationship is like, maybe, I don't know, maybe my favorite friendship I've read in a book. There's a lot that's like hard to say, but they have such a like brotherly bond. Like this is such a like found family kind of book and kind of series, and just getting to see all the characters like Gibbsy and Claire, and then you have Lizzie, where Gibbsy is another thing. I'm so curious about Gibbsy. I want to know more about him. We got a little glimpse of that, of like what has happened with his family at the end, something very traumatic. His whole situation with Claire, with the best friend's little sister thing, here for it. Lizzie is a total bitch, but I feel like we're gonna meet her and understand why she is the way she is. Clearly there's like stuff about her that we're not, you know, hearing. So even like Huey is her brother, and then you have Feely, like there's just, and Aoife and Joey, I can't get over them. I'm so ready to read their story. Yeah, I'll be honest, of course once it ended I loved it, but about halfway through this book, or a little more than half, I don't know, I felt like in the middle it just got kind of like a little slow for me, and I just was kind of ready to be out of Shannon's head. I feel like I love Johnny and I love Shannon too, but it's just because of her situation and what she's been through, her head is just a hard place to be in, and it was a lot of like repetitive thoughts between her, I mean, and Johnny. Just the situation was difficult, and I feel like there were a lot of conversations that was like, we're having the same conversation like over and over, like, do you really like me? Do you really care about me? Like, do you want to take on my family's drama? And it's like, yes, I do. I love you. And I was like, I get it. I'm sure it's so realistic. That's exactly how it would be, but it just felt like about, I don't know, towards the end, I'm like, okay, I'm really ready to like see a different side to this story. So I am very excited to see what happens in Joey's book. I know that book, because there was a tiny little excerpt of it at the end of this, it jumps backwards. So it starts in like 1999, which I think this one started in like 2003 or 4 or 5, something like that. So I know that it jumps back in time, and I think that, you know, you kind of have like some backstory there. And then I know just from talking to people that you see a lot of the scenes that happened in this duet in Joey's duet, like you see them again, but from Joey's point of view. So I think it's going to be so interesting and very kind of Magnolia Parks-esque, the way that we're going to have like the main story that we see here, but then you also have this whole side story, kind of like when you go into the Daisy Hates books and you see Christian's point of view, and you see like everything that happens with the main friend group that you know, but then whenever he goes and hangs out with like Daisy's friends, you know, you see that whole other story. Like I think it's just gonna, I don't know, I just have a feeling like Joey's story is going to freaking like be it for me. I just think he's going to be a character that I'm just like gonna connect with and love so much. So yeah, that being freaking said, I am mind blown by Chloe Walsh. I don't really know how her brain works. This was just such a like vast duet, a heavy duet, a just dark, sad. It made me feel every type of emotion. It stressed me out to no end. I just literally, it was on the edge of my seat reading this. It like made me like semi-nauseous at points. Like I kind of had to take some breaks from reading this book, because I was just like, it was a lot. But I think she did it so well. It felt so real and so just like authentic, and yeah, I'm literally recommending this book, this series, to everybody. I'm going to wait until Joey's book officially comes out again. It's in a couple of weeks. It comes out in February. It's already out. Like I can read the indie version, but they're being republished by Bloom Books, and they're coming out with these pretty little ombre spines. So I just want to wait until it's officially out again by this publisher so I can get my little matching paperback. I also want to pace myself. I just know that if I were to binge this series, I would be left with like a gaping hole in my chest. I don't really feel like doing that. I don't feel like being in a reading slump. So I think the kind of pace of them coming out like a month apart, you know, for the next however long, because we have Joey's 2 stories. I think the first one comes out in February, second comes out in March, and then we have Gibbsy's story, Taming 7, which I'm really excited about. That's gonna be a little later this year. I can't remember what month it is, but I'm fine with pacing myself. I really just want to like take my time and my love and my care with this series, because it's good. It's heavy, but it's good. And yeah, I just think by the end of it, it's gonna freaking break me because his friend group's gonna feel like it's my friend group and I just like don't know what to do about it. And I love the early 2000s settings, and also freaking, I'm sorry, I don't care. Like every man in the story is Paul Mescal to me. Paul Mescal Chicken Shop Date came out and he, like, I picture Johnny as him the entire time. They probably don't really like look that much alike. I'm sure that's not what he's supposed to be, but we're like, okay, blue eyes, he's got dark hair. I'm like, it's Paul Mescal. Like he's all I can picture when I'm reading this. So I'm just like, fuck, that doesn't help. That really doesn't help with the obsession. I'm just, I need to go to Ireland. Maybe I should go to Ireland. I don't know. Yeah, if you guys read this duet, which I sincerely hope you did, if you watched this spoiler-filled video, let me know your thoughts down below. Do not spoil anything for me with Joey's book, but like, you can give me a vibe. Is it gonna break me? Is it gonna be the greatest thing I've ever read? It just seems like it's everybody's favorite, and I don't know if I'm ready. I don't know if I'm ready, but I'm gonna have to be. So yeah, that is it for me today. Thank you so much for watching, and I will talk to you very soon. Bye.